The cost of living. Everyone's talking about it, and I want to do a quick comparison of New Zealand versus the UK because New Zealand is cheaper than the UK, right? Let's have a look. So let's start off with a few categories that I want to cover. I've lived in New Zealand for 15 years now. I left the UK when I was 18 with nothing but my best friend in a backpack. And I think things are quite different to what most people think that they are. So I'm going to give you my experience of 15 years living in New Zealand. I want to cover things like rent, food, taxes, and any hidden expenses and compare the differences to the UK. The first category we're going to cover is rent. Now, this one is quite shocking. Auckland CBD, which is our largest city, has 1 million people. It's by far the biggest city in the country, and it's kind of our version of London. So I've got a comparison of London Zone 2 and 3 here. Now, a one bed apartment in London is going to cost you about 1,800 to £2,200, or 3,700 to 4,500, depending on the exchange rate, New Zealand dollars. And in Auckland, there's a comparison. Again, much smaller, but you're looking at about $2,500 to $3,000 or 1,200 to £1,400. But Auckland is 30% smaller than London. So you've got a lot fewer options. And those properties that do come up get snapped up really, really quickly. And there's such a high demand in Auckland that property prices and rents just increase astronomically every single year. Now, the UK regions, it is much cheaper. Manchester, for example, you're looking at 900 to £1,200, whereas in New Zealand regions, it's still very, very pricey. So Wellington, as an example, is about 2,200 for one bed. And in Tauranga, where I live, we have a three-bed place here, and that's $3,000 that we spend every single month, or 700 plus dollars a week just in rent. So I think the UK definitely has cheaper houses. You have more supply and probably less demand, which means that rents are a lot cheaper. Whereas in New Zealand, we just don't have the supply and the demand is really, really high. Groceries. Now, this is another one that I think a lot of people look at New Zealand as producing a lot of dairy products. So dairy products should be cheap. But the truth is, it's just not. It's so much more profitable to export all of our products to different countries. And there's just a lack of competition with our grocery retailers here. We only really have two retailers, Pack and Save and Woolworths are the two biggest. And basically, they control 80% of the market and they can just charge whatever they like. So milk in New Zealand is about £1.05 for a litre. And in New Zealand, it's $3.20. So it's about 200% more expensive for milk. Bread is another example, £1.10 versus New Zealand is $3.50. So again, 218% more expensive in New Zealand. This was probably the biggest and most shocking thing I found when I first got here was groceries are just absolutely ridiculous. 1 kilo of chicken is about £3.50 or $13 in New Zealand, which is about 270% more expensive. It's really lucky if you can get any cheap meat at all, and the cheap meat that is discounted is just snapped up super quick. A dozen eggs or 2 dozen eggs is about £2.50 in the UK, and in New Zealand you're looking at least $9, so 260% more expensive. Now, obviously, we live so far away from the rest of the world that we do import way more of our products, but even the basics like chicken, bread, and eggs that we make here are just so much more profitable to export. And the retailers that dominate 80% of the market here, they just charge us an absolute arm and a leg, and there's nothing we can do about it. So I definitely think UK has a better grocery sector, particularly retailers like Aldi that can sort of have big scale and stores all over the place and will drive down prices. We just don't have the competition here. And we're kind of waiting for another retailer to show up and show the two that are here how it's really done and how competition actually works, because the competitors here just don't exist. Now, salaries and taxes. So, average salary in the UK before tax is about £35,000 or $71,000. In New Zealand, you're looking at $70,000 or £34,000. But after tax is where things get interesting. So in the UK, you're looking at £2,300 a month or 4,700. And in New Zealand, it's about £41,000 a month or £2,000. So the UK tax rate, you get 20% up to 50k and then 40% over and above. But the UK also has a standard personal allowance of 12,570, which is the amount of income you don't have to pay tax on. And if you earn over £100,000, your personal allowance goes down to £1 for every £2 that is adjusted your net income over 100. So you definitely have better tax rates in the UK. versus New Zealand. In New Zealand, you're looking at 10.5% up to 14K. And then we have this really interesting staggered system. So 0 to 15 is 10.5, 15 to 53 is 17, and then it goes up to 30, 33, and 39%. They were changes from April 1st. And then we have these new ones here. So they've even raised it a little bit more, 180 over. They've added some extra tax ones in here. So 70 to 78 is 30. And then you have 33. So we just have big tax rates for the middle class people here. The big issue is in New Zealand is middle class pays more tax than the UK. And our top tax rate is actually 39% now. It was 33. So I definitely think if you're in sort of a lower or middle salary in the UK, you're probably going to pay a lot less tax. Now, hidden costs, things like cars and fuels. Used cars, UK has cheaper and newer models. I've seen a lot cheaper cars when I visit the UK versus New Zealand. We import all of our old cars and we have to pay tax and fees on those cars. So we either have old cars or we have brand new cars, which are really, really expensive. And obviously, if you're buying an old car, then there's a maintenance cost that goes along with that. Now, in terms of petrol, you have New Zealand petrol, which is about £1.30 per litre. And in the UK, it's about £1.45. So quite comparable there. I wouldn't say it's too much of a difference. Obviously, New Zealand is quite a big country and we have a lot of driving to do. Just about everyone drives in New Zealand. It's pretty much a necessity. Even 15 and 16-year-olds, the first thing they're doing is getting a car. Whereas I was 18 when I left the UK and I wasn't driving. As soon as I got to New Zealand, you just have to drive because the country is so spread out that to get anywhere, and public transport is absolutely shocking. We have no trains here basically at all, and the bus system is just as bad as the UK. So you effectively have to drive in New Zealand. Now, heating and power, something I do miss about the UK is central heating. Central heating is amazing, although it will cost you, particularly in winter. You're looking at about £100 a month. But in New Zealand, we actually don't have central heating. Most of our stuff is run off electric heaters, like the one I have in the corner there, or we have heat pumps. You would usually only have a heat pump in like a dining area or a lounge area. You may even have one in the bedroom if you're lucky. But other than that, most of the stuff is run off these small electric heaters. And during winter, when it gets cold, you can rack up a bill of $300 plus easily. With no insulation in our houses, all of our houses are wood, unlike the brick houses, which are built for those colder UK winters. Our houses are all wood and very minimal to no insulation on the inside of the building. You definitely have insulation on the outside, and some people will insulate a garage, but insulation on the inside is optional, and a lot of people don't do it because it's cheaper to build houses, and then they'll just install a heat pump or just tell you to get an electric heater if you're cold. The last house we had in Mount Maunganui was absolutely freezing in winter. We just all have bigger hoodies on and maybe an electric heater that you can buy and then just put in a room, but they do cost quite a lot of money to run. They're not very energy efficient. Healthcare. Now, the UK, obviously, you have the free NHS system. I know it has its flaws, but it is free. There are long wait times. In New Zealand, it's quite different. New Zealand's largest insurer is called ACC, and they do partly subsidize some of the things that go wrong in New Zealand. Like if you have an accident, you do have to go through ACC and they will make a claim for you. If your claim gets approved, you can have surgery. But if you want to visit a GP, it can cost you between sort of $50, $60 per GP visit. And that is slightly subsidized by ACC. And then you will have your prescriptions on top of that. So the UK definitely wins out in terms of healthcare, bar the long wait times. Although in New Zealand, wait times are quite high now. It's about 4 to 6 weeks to see a GP, and you have to pay for it. Then you have to pay for your prescription. If you have an injury, you have to make a claim with ACC. I recently had a back injury. You have to fill in some paperwork. You have to tell them how the injury occurred. Then they will go away and make an assessment. If they assess you and deem it as an accident, then they will approve your claim. Then you can get surgery. So that sort of system isn't perfect, and it does take quite a long time. NHS free, pretty seamless, although there are long wait times as well. Now, the verdict, I definitely think New Zealand is better, and even better if you can earn a remote UK or US salary and earn a bit more money, because the wages aren't that great in New Zealand. And if you live outside of Auckland, it's still not cheap, but I wouldn't recommend living in Auckland because it is quite expensive. If you can live outside of Auckland and find a good paying job, even if you get a remote UK US salary job, that's even better. But I think in terms of cost of living, the UK is probably better, but only if you want lower food costs, cheaper transport for sure, and you do have more options, obviously, because it's a bigger, more well established country. If you earn under 50K, you're also going to have a better take home pay. So, yeah, that's kind of a quick snapshot in terms of the cost of living, UK versus New Zealand. Let me know what you think in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to this channel. I'll be making more UK versus NZ content, and we'll talk a little bit more what I do for work and how I earn a living in this country. Yeah, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one.